This is Ryan with Curate. I'm super excited today. We've got an incredible episode. This is the Event Driven Podcast. Our focus on this is really giving information for event professionals to grow their companies, to look at different parts of their companies, ask really serious questions around those, and ask how can I make those better? We like to say so many times people will go to a conference or convention and then they get all these different ideas around every single aspect of their business, and it's kind of hard to implement those. So we tackle one thing each week, one particular piece of companies each week, and we ask that question of, hey, how can we improve? How can we make this better? And so that's really huge for us to be able to have that. So today we've got some really exciting things. Before I introduce our guest, who I'm super excited about having on, I want to chat a little bit about about the subject, and that's the subject of time spent on proposals. So many of us spend so much time and effort on these proposals, and it can become a headache, and there's there's so many pieces for us when we're trying to ask that question: how do I optimize my sales process and create a great experience? So today we brought on an expert. I would definitely consider her one of our industry experts. Emily Dawson is the owner of All Grand Events Floral. I was chatting with her last week, and we talked about having her come on. Emily, we're so excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So I was really admiring last week when we were chatting. You had a lot of very unique perspectives on subjects that I think hang up a lot of people, especially when we're talking about design. And we won't get too deep into this now, but just kind of could you give, like, what's the difference between maybe the design industry and someone who maybe has more standard offerings that they just kind of like that they have to spin out each time on a proposal? Like, what are some of the intricacies and differences between what you have to do when you're building a design proposal versus maybe someone without needing as deep of a creative flair?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely all wrapped up in the customization of everything. So, there is not just a one size fits all bouquet. There's not a one size fits all centerpiece or an
Hmm.
art or anything like that. Everybody is completely different. Somebody could come with the exact same budget, the exact same color palette, and we might use two entirely different sets of florals in those. Those take time to recipe out. Everything is very individualized. Maybe somebody wants gold candlesticks, someone wants black candlesticks. It's so custom that you end up spending a lot of time as opposed to somebody who's just dragging and dropping into a proposal, this size, this item, this item, this size, this item,
Hmm.
and they just have a flat inventory and they're just dragging and dropping items in and have a multiplier of the quantity, and that's it. Everything is so customized on the back end from a design perspective that you're not only paying for the actual item in the product, but you're also paying for the designer's knowledge and creative brain to put that all together in the way you want it to be put together.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I remember my wife, people would come to, so my wife is a floral designer, just kind of this amazing designer. I'm not a floral designer. I can put together a big bomb hydrangea arrangement at 12 p.m. when it's needed or 12 a.m. Sorry, when it's needed to just wrap something up. But my wife, there would be times people would come to her with particular photos and say, hey, we want to do this. And so there's this aspect of you're having like consider all these different pieces, right? Like what is the seasonality of these items coming in? What's the look of them? There's times my wife would say, "That's beautiful," but and I love that idea and this this Pinterest board, but that's not my style, right? Like, so it's also weighing in
Sure.
like what how do we work? So like, what would you say some of those factors are when you bring someone in? Like, what are those factors that you're thinking through just a million miles a second when they're kind of talking about their ideas? What are those factors you're considering as you're trying to figure out what to propose when you get to that point?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you kind of have your like must-have items. Like pretty much everybody who's coming to us with a wedding is like they're wanting a bouquet, they're wanting centerpieces. That's sort of like absolute bare minimum. A lot of venues will offer linens, chairs, but like absolute bare minimum. We kind of got to talk like bouquets, centerpieces. And then from there, it's really budget driven at that point. Like, okay, after we've done this, even if we do a pretty minimal centerpiece or if we do something very luxurious, what do we have left over after we do those things and what else can we do? And that I always lean back on the client at that point. Like, what are your priorities? Do you want that really amazing picture with
Mm,
a giant arch at a ceremony? Do you want Do you want to kind of leave your ceremony alone? Maybe it's in this very ornate church and flowers are just going to kind of not do anything there because it's big and there's lots of stained glass and it's already really beautiful and they don't need anything extra. And maybe you want to do something really amazing in the reception space. Maybe you want to do something strolling. I really lean on what the client wants the evening to look like for them when making those decisions. And then obviously always budget's always going to come into place. When it comes to specific flowers, of course, seasonality is going to come into place. And then thinking about how it works within, if they want to keep relatively minimal centerpieces, certain flowers go great in bud vases, certain ones
Right.
don't. So also thinking of the different types of containers and how those might go together in a way that fits the vision that they're going for. In addition to, can I even get those flowers that time of year? Or I can get them, but they're not great. Or I can get those locally and they're going to be amazing and I can count
Right.
on them. So many different factors, but client's vision and budget is really the long and the short of everything.
Yeah, I like that. I even again, I do this for a living, thinking about proposing and proposals and like how do we automate this. But there are those factors that I've always talked to my team about around. At some point we have to let our clients be the experts, right? Like we're providing the tool as a software company. We're providing clients the tools, but there's always these random ideas of like, oh, we can integrate some sort of AI tool and da 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 da, which is great. Like I think that's powerful, but at the same time it's gonna be a long time before an AI knows that a birds of paradise isn't going to go in a small bud vase, right? Like doesn't matter what's on Pinterest. You like
Right.
there's or what the client wants is like, okay, well, but let's talk about that. Like you have this random thing that you found and it's just not going to fit. And what I found that's really interesting, I like what you said about the budget and the vision. You all have a unique process at All Grand Events about how you think about proposals when a proposal actually occurs in this process. Could you walk me through what is that normal client flow look like when a client comes in or expresses interest to use y'all for their event?
Yeah. So initially we have them fill out an inquiry form. We actually have created it, rate and curate, and then we link it right on our website. So when someone goes to our website, they click on floral questionnaire or floral and design question. Actually, I might just say wedding questionnaire now that I think about it. They fill that out and it asks all the questions we would need to have answered in order for us to feel comfortable scheduling a meeting. So, someone fills that out and they have a 400-person guest list and they want the sun, the moon, and the stars, and they say I have that $7,000 budget. I'm like, okay, we need to have a moment to even have a discussion. Like if we literally can't do that. So, but if we're looking at all their answers and we're like, okay, they have a reasonable budget for their guest list for what they're asking for. I send over my Calendly link for them to schedule a meeting with me. We do them all over Google Meet. And then during that meeting, I am asking every question I would need to fully design a wedding for them. So I am operating under the assumption that they're going to book us. And I'm asking for their inspo photos. I'm asking shape, size of bouquet, flowers they like, flowers they don't like. I'm going through what their entire vision is for the day so that if they were to at the end of the meeting say, yes, I want to book you, I'd be able to fully put together a design proposal. So ask all those questions. At the end of that meeting, what I send out to them, I create it and curate, and it is a sample design proposal. So it's got a very basic color palette, a mood board within that color palette. That's all just like green, white, black, some taupes. And then it's a full design proposal with pictures and everything on there. And then within each line item, it lists average price ranges for everything. So some of those things for like a wedding bouquet, that's going to be a tighter range. Like, those are usually about
Right.
350 to 425. So, that's a pretty easy one to do. But then some things like under our one that says like ceremony arch, that says like ranges anywhere from like $500 with just greenery to $10,000 if you want like a full floral
Hmm.
arch. So some of the things have really small ranges, some of the things have really big ranges, but it basically lists every possible thing that anybody has sort of ever asked us to do. And it's a very long proposal. So people can go through and say, well, I know if I have this many people, this is about how many tables I have. I like these two couple of this type of centerpiece. I know this is about the range. They can do the math and say, wow, at very minimum with these average prices, I do all this math. This is about how much it's going to cost. I really liked her and I liked her ideas on the call. I want to go ahead and book her. Also within that sample design proposal is how we calculate out our labor. So how we calculate out like the installation, the setup, how we calculate out our strike or tear out if they want us to stay to move something from the ceremony to the reception. And then basically the fact that if you have any additional rental items that are coming from a rental company, that price would just be based on whatever they charge for their labor. So I send that every single person that has a consult with me gets that exact same document. So I spent one day making that whole document, and that has just
Interesting.
that just lives in Curate. The date is set for sometime in 2027, just so it doesn't get confusing on our calendar or anything. We just keep bumping that date out. But that lives in Curate. That same document goes to every single person as soon as I have a meeting with them. And then if they decide they want to book us, then we take a deposit at that time. It gets applied in full to their order. And then at that point is when I do a customized proposal for them. And I've already had their meeting. I've already had their design meeting. So I know exactly how to make that proposal. And sometimes I'll ask the question like, do you want me to include everything we talked about? Do you want to see the sun, moon, and the stars and you tell me what to cut? Or do you want me to make a proposal based on, I know what your likes and dislikes are. I know we're going to have some budget concerns. So do you want me to only show you what I think will best optimize your budget and what I think kind of gives you the most bang for your buck amongst the things you
Hmm.
said you wanted? So I think basically I'm not doing any work aside from essentially a 1 hour meeting. And then, I'm not even having any email back and forth because they're using my Calendly link to schedule a meeting. I do like a 1 hour consultation meeting, and is basically the only amount of work I do without being paid.
And so if they say, "Hey, I want to book you," what do they do? If you could go into that a little deeper.
So if they say I want to book you, then I guess to back up a little bit, when I'm having my consultation with them, I have created a file in Curate. So as I'm asking them
Hmm.
the design detail questions, I'm taking the notes for what they want right into each line item because I have a template for
Okay.
taking those notes. So I'm taking those notes right in Curate under each of those line items. So when I actually go to do a proposal, all I got to do is like zhuzh up how the sentence structure is and change it from notes to like an actual proposal verbiage. But so I have a file, so to speak, already open for them. So if they want to book us, what I do is I go through and I draft all of those line items so you can't see them. And so then the only thing that's showing up on there is like a line item for the deposit and the contract. So then
Okay.
they sign the contract, they pay the deposit, I can apply it to the order. And then once I actually go to put the proposal together, I basically just delete that retainer line item. And then they've already got all this other stuff that money's applying to. And
Right.
then they get that proposal still within the same Curate proposal link.
Right. That makes sense. Okay. And then I really like that flow. So what's so interesting about this is I know we did this when we owned our when we owned Twisted Willow was we would always put together. It was super important to get a proposal out to people quickly. We'd get it to them sometimes the same day. Sometimes, we'd always within 24 hours, but sometimes the same day. But we would be building out a proposal for every single client that comes in. And if I hear what you're saying, you've kind of flipped that script a little bit. And you're
Mm-hmm.
instead of building a proposal for every single client, you're basically just giving them an example proposal. What went into that? Have you always done this? Like what led to that?
So the idea was originally given to me actually by my mentor. She is the owner of Modern Day Collective. They're about an hour west of us. So she originally started this process. She did it a little bit differently than I do in terms of number of meetings and order of events, but
Hmm.
basically the idea was doing the proposal after somebody booked and giving them enough information up front that they could feel like they're making a very well educated decision
Right.
and there weren't going to be any surprises later. So that's basically so we didn't always do that. I started out in the industry. I didn't have any actual experience. So of course I did what everybody else does. And I sat and did these hours upon hours upon hours long proposal because I thought that doing a very detailed proposal was what was the determining factor in somebody booking us. I had just the mindset that I think probably most people do, that like, well, nobody would ever give you money to do something if they don't know exactly how much it's going to cost them. And my argument is that, at least with our clientele, I don't want to say like the budgets are super fluid, but I feel really confident in understanding how our pricing works. That when somebody sends me their guest list, their wants and needs, some inspo photos, and what their general budget is, I can, in my mind, say, yeah, we can do that. No, we can't do that. Or we can do that. You might have to pick a couple of things you can get rid of, but for the
Sure.
most part, you'll get most of the things you want. And what I found is that as long as you have a very good product, people are generally buying from people. So they like us, they
Mm,
like the service we're providing. It's very clear amongst our socials and our website and our reviews and all the information that's available out in the world that they can access, that we're very good at what we do. So the line item pricing to the penny up front is not necessary for people to book us.
I guess the question that I hear just here in my mind, and I hear so many other designers saying, I've got this person coming to me, they've got three other people that are giving them actual line item proposals.
Mhm.
Like, how, how do you get, how do you educate that client? Because what you're saying is you're really establishing and building that trust up front, and you're giving that client this ability to ask that question earlier rather than later of like, hey, do I trust this? Do I trust this company? Like, is this the direction that I want to go? But how do you do that? How do you educate a client on that when you know that there's five other people that they're talking to that are willing to give them kind of this line item proposal? Like, what does that flow and process look like for you?
So for one thing, we have a blog on our website and it lays out exactly what our process is. And every time someone even inquires with us, I always send a link to that blog and just say, hey, here's our
That's
booking
awesome.
process. So in theory, assuming they're reading it, that it really shouldn't be a surprise to them. We also operate under the assumption that nobody's reading that. We're very clear that like nobody's probably reading the information we're giving them. And so we we just tell them, we say, we allocate a lot of time into our design proposals. We want this to be exactly right for you. And I promise that you don't want us to be the type of company that is so bogged down trying to get business that we can't allocate any time to the people that have actually already hired us. And
Mm,
that is really that's where people, that's a selling point for us. A selling point for us is that like you will get a lot more attention because we are not divided in a thousand directions. And ultimately, I would say that the bulk of the people that are hiring us aren't even necessarily interviewing anybody else. We are sort of the first place that they stopped. They liked us. They're like, yeah, I
okay.
trust them. We're good. There's also the reality that there are realistically some people that absolutely will not book you if they don't have a line item proposal. And I am of the philosophy that that is just not our client. The people that, because realistically, somebody who needs everything very much priced out for them is going to make every single design decision completely 100% based on budget. And we want people who are more likely to be booking based on the style they want. Maybe they have a slight bit of wiggle room within their budget. We're, of course, going to always respect what somebody wants to spend and never push
Sure.
anybody to spend more than what they're comfortable with. But ultimately, people are generally just not hiring us because we're the absolute cheapest price point and we're going to have that hard and fast budget we're going to stay under. So I think having just a really large amount of confidence in the service and the product you're able to provide, we just tell people straight up, like, we just do not provide proposals up front. That is just not part of our business structure. And you probably don't want us to do that because that would take a lot of time away from you if you do book us.
Yeah. Well, and I loved how you said it earlier, where it's almost like they're we're saying, well, we could go really fast and build this thing out, but that's not going to catch your vision, right? Like, we aren't spending the time to build the vision that you're wanting in the first place. So that makes a lot of sense for creating the education. I love what you said. Number one, we're going to educate people, and then number two, we're going to assume they aren't educated. I was an eighth grade math teacher in a previous life, and I had to, as a math teacher, literally had to say, I have to assume that none of these eighth graders have graduated kindergarten, and some of them it was debatable, right? But I just had to walk in with this assumption of like, okay, I can't just assume that I've got to help them through this. I've got to work, because some of them are super advanced. Some of them just were missing maybe a basic thing they had never picked up over the years. And I love that perspective of always giving your clients that respect of saying, you're busy. I understand it. Maybe you didn't, see that. So we're going to continue this education process. So I think that's a really powerful attribute and approach. I hear so many event professionals, and it's not just event pros or florists. It's just humans. We're just humans, and it's easy to complain and to be like, oh man, I got another one of these people that they da 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 da. And I've always been an advocate, and I think you exemplify this very well of saying, well, if I get frustrated about something, I'm the business owner. I'm the entrepreneur, right? I'm the person that needs to take the step back and ask, how do I solve that? And it sounds like this was
Right.
that. This is part of that approach. It's like I'm wasting your if I'm hearing what you said, you previously did this, you're wasting just hours and hours and hours building proposals that weren't even going to go anywhere. The people weren't even motivated enough to kind of move forward, but it's like, well, this is what we just have to do as a business owner. And you just flipped the script on that and said, hey, was there a particular client or a particular moment where you said, all right, I'm done. We we have to shift? Is it that mentor call that you talked about? When was that moment and you're like, you know what, I'm leaning more toward, let's start doing it this new way?
Yeah, I mean, definitely when I first had like that mentor call, I mean, I don't even think it was on my radar that it was a problem that needed to be fixed necessarily. It just there's definitely like instances where I know people like kind of took our proposal to somebody else who just was like,
Mm,
we can do this for less. And I'm like, I can put all the disclaimers and all the like verbiage on our proposals that say like, you cannot take this and duplicate it without our written
right,
consent. Like I always think of like of the like National Football League. Like that's what I hear when I when I hear
right,
that
right.
term. But you can't take this, you can't copy it, can't share it with anybody. All it takes is one other company who has no business ethics to just say like, yeah, I can do that, but I can do it for $500 less, and someone goes with them. So I knew I had a sense that like that was an issue. I had just kind of no idea that it was even an option to do it this way, and what that looked like, and how people could have enough information to make a decision and make a well-educated decision without feeling like they were just like taking a stab in the dark and making a leap of faith, because we also don't
Hmm.
have clients with like unlimited budgets either. We need to be respectful of that as well. So I think that mentor call really like kicked it off. And then pretty much every decision since then, I feel like has definitely been made with the mindset of like, you don't have to follow these like unwritten rules. It's your business. You are an entrepreneur for a reason. And that's so that you can make the decisions and you can shape your business to function in the way it is. Just because every other person in the world is doing a proposal before booking doesn't mean that you have to do that if that
Right.
just feels like not the right process for you.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, you found a particular group of customers that's a perfect fit for you.
Mhm.
And I think that is so hard for people that they're looking at their 20, that they're 2024. I've talked with some people and their 2024 is killing it, right? Like they're doing the best they've ever done. And I'm talking to other people and they're really having a tough year this year. And it's like hearing that
Yeah.
advice, like finding that person, that client that's a perfect fit for you and that matches you. And it sounds like from what you're saying that not only are you looking for that type of client, but these decisions are helping you filter out to find that type of client who's going to trust you, who's more interested in the vision. Because I think I like to say most people getting married is their first time getting married, right? A lot of
Right.
a lot
Nobody
of
knows
people.
anything.
Yes, exactly. So it's like it's almost like we create the expectation in these clients for what the flow is supposed to be. This is like we're creating this, and I see all kinds of times. I don't see this in the floral industry as much, but I see this in other parts of the wedding industry where they have these random fees, and I've never heard of them, but they're just normal. They're just a part of that, and it's because that particular culture, when somebody gets in to using that particular type of vendor, they just get educated, say, oh, okay, this type of fee is associated
Right.
with it. And so it makes sense that you're almost creating that education because there could be that client. And I mean, have you had a situation where like had that same person, do you feel like had you had maybe this incredible client, but had they went another route first, they would have totally been almost that line item pricing type person, but when you educated them this direction, they became the perfect client that really was inherently a fit for who you love to help.
Yeah, I mean, I guess not that I can like explicitly say like I know that that was their thought process, but it seems impossible that we haven't had somebody that probably
Sure,
came in
sure,
expecting a proposal, then ultimately was like, oh yeah, this is fine, this is plenty of information. We've definitely had the other way around, and I don't want to say like this is like the holy grail of all proposal processes, even though I really do
hmm
believe that. But this isn't going to give you like 100% conversion rate. There's still
right,
like right clients and wrong clients for you, and there's people who are going to pick other people over you for whatever reason, and that's just the reality of. But we've definitely had people that actually we've done the other way around, where there was just so many specific questions in so many emails after a consultation that already had answered all the questions that there were to possibly answer.
mm,
And we just eventually had to say, I think we're probably not the best fit for you, because I don't think that there's going to be any amount of information that we can give you that's going to make you feel comfortable without actually seeing a line item proposal pricing. And here are some of our very favorite florists that will provide that for you. And I think that you'd be more comfortable going in that direction, because it just was abundantly clear that no matter how many questions we answered, no matter how much information we gave, unless we were going to give like this is exactly how much this is going to cost, and this is exactly the flowers we're going to use in each of your designs, which we also don't do because we're selling palettes and concepts and not
right, right.
recipes, that was not going to ever be a good fit for us. So that is also the reality of there are going to be people that really need that, and they're just not our clients, and that's okay.
Right. I think that's so powerful because again, you've thought this through to that point of we're not just going to tell you, hey, no, we're not a fit. We're going to say, we are going to say it, but in a very polite way. Hey, you know, we've got this list of
Sure.
how do you, I was like, I remember we had this list when we realized, like, hey, we were out of date or whatever. We had kind of this list of clients. Like, so if I'm the florist out there and I want to be on that list for Emily or for whoever my local, you know, other partners in crime are, or not crime,
Yeah.
but you know, floral crime, our partners in floral crime are. How does someone get on that list? It's kind of it's the weirdest question, but I think it'd be fun to have in the episode.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is that it's regional, so we know their wedding is in this city, and we have worked with these people before. We've seen their work. You know, we have a pretty vast range of freelancers that have worked various events for us, but then also have their
Hmm.
own business on those weekends where they're not working for us. So we know
Ah,
that they do a great job. So we're going to refer people to the people that have worked for us and we know do a good job. And then some other people, you know, because of the structure of our business, Lynette does all of planning. And before we merged, she has worked directly with tons of florists around the whole state. So she has a lot of good input to, you know, these
that's
people are
cool.
really easy to work with. You know, they have and it's also a style thing. Like, you know, if somebody's just wanting something pretty basic, I don't have to think as hard about, you know, stylistically who I might recommend.
Oh, that's a
But if
great point.
somebody wants something that's really similar to what we create, I'm of course going to try to send them to somebody who's freelanced for us before, and I can say, you know, they've helped execute some of these events for us. So
Hmm.
you're gonna be in great hands if you like our style. Here's a good person to go with. So
I love that.
that for the most part, that's how, you know, there's really not like an actual list. It's a mental list in our brain of who we would recommend
Yeah.
based on where they're at. You know, and some people too, it's, you know, we're recommending them regionally because there's maybe it's a budget concern and we don't want them to have travel costs either.
That makes sense. Yeah, when we were in so we're in St. Louis, and the way that St. Louis is geographically, most any florist in the St. Louis area could be accessible. So we did kind of
Right.
have the static list of like, hey, here's these 5 companies, awesome companies, you should go chat with them. And
Right.
part of that process was for us was like the minimum budget. You know, we had a minimum budget of 4K. If someone came in and they really were just looking for personals, we realized, hey, we aren't a fit. Tell me a little bit about your minimum budget. I would say, like, you know, as you're getting a lot of people that are coming in expressing interest, there's people that are clearly a fit. There's people that you clearly can't help at the level that they like. What does that look like for you all? How'd you get there?
So our current budget minimum is $7,000. So over the years, that's changed. For I want to say it was back in about 2016, we realized that we needed to have some sort of budget because the way we don't have a retail shop, so we don't have something where, you know, we can use some of these flowers to make bouquets and then everything else we can sell in a store. Like everything that we order is for a specific event. So we started with a $3,000 minimum, saying, you know, that's really what we need to make in order to get a flower delivery, have the markups there. And that's basically to do like very minimal centerpieces, bouquets, and our labor. And that's what I need to take time away from my family on the weekends. Pretty quickly after there, almost all of our weddings were right around the $5,000 mark. So I was like, well, we're just going to bump it up to 5,000 because that's what people are spending. And very quickly we stopped getting inquiries because apparently, even though everybody wants to spend 5,000, if we list 5,000, that was going to be too much. So we bumped it back down to 3. Then we kept getting weddings, and then we were able to eventually bump it back up to 5. And then COVID hit, and then pricing on everything like doubled. So then we have since bumped it up to 7. 7 is our little sweet spot where we feel like even if you're just still doing centerpieces, bouquets, maybe some sort of something at the ceremony, some sort of smaller installation piece, plus our labor, and that's all assuming, you know, about 150 guest count and somewhat local, that we can produce a wedding that is representative of everything you see on our website and our social media.
Mm,
So we do have like a certain level that people are coming to us. You know, they're generally not coming to us for like a hydrangea ball and a vase that, you know,
right.
you can go anywhere for that, get that pretty cheap, but people are seeing these like very elaborate recipes, these pretty rich color palettes. They're coming to us for these like really specific types of designs. And so we don't feel comfortable advertising anything less than that $7,000 minimum because then it's kind of putting out like a false expectation that you can get everything you see on our social media, but within that budget. So $7,000 is our happy spot where I can afford to pay our freelancers what they are charging. I can staff it, I can make profit, and again, being compensated for being away from my family. Ultimately, it's a business and I am contributing to half of our household income. So that also needs to be taken into account. And anything less than that is just not realistic. with the caveat, we will sometimes do corporate events that are under that $7,000 because a lot of times that's
Sure.
like, hey, we need 18 centerpieces and you don't even need to come pick them up at the end of the night. Like that's something we can do. We can meet our minimum wholesale order. We can still meet our margins. And a lot of times they're on a random Tuesday and not taking away from a prime Saturday in August or something. So, there are exceptions where we go lower than that, but it would never be for a wedding.
Right. Yeah. And typically on corporate events, I was just chatting with another florist yesterday about this, where when a lot of times there's not as much emotion involved in those, right? And
No,
people wanting to see very specifics and nuances.
they're
To your
also not
point, we just
usually
need
spending their own money.
touche. That's exactly right. Yes. So it makes it a lot. There's a budget somewhere for it versus I'm creating the budget for this. So that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. So, and I think something to really point out is that phrase that you said. It's hard to be able to hit, and we can't hit beneath $7,000 to get the experience that you see on our website and our socials. And I think that's really a great way to frame it because for everyone that amount is a different amount, right? For some people it still
Mhm.
is that 3,000. For some people it's that 20,000. But that's the way. If you love what you saw on our website, if you love the experiences you're seeing on our socials, then here's what it costs. This is just the investment that has to be made. And you were able to rattle off several other pieces: freelancers, wholesale, minimum order costs, things like that. But I think that's a really succinct way. And so anyone out there in the design world that's like trying to think of ways, how do I, in a positive way, because it's so easy to get so negative in this industry. It's so
Right.
easy to be like, oh, and I can't do that, and that's not possible. How do we positively phrase that? And I love how you phrase that because I think it frames it in a way that everybody's excited about. That makes sense. Even if I can't get it, then they're leaving you. Even if they realize that they can't use you, they're leaving you with a better expectation as they walk into that next florist to understand, like,
Yeah.
what am I going to get out of this?
And I think too, like I'm very comfortable telling people our process and our pricing, and that just comes with personality plus just years of experience. And I'm okay just giving out that information, even if it might be something people don't want to hear in a nice way. But
Sure, sure.
there's other things that we do. When somebody inquires, we have a pricing guide we've created, and it's more of a
Mm,
services guide. It's sort of like here's all the things we offer, but it's got some just like basic price ranges. Like usually people who have this many guests and want centerpieces, bouquets, installation. This is about what they usually spend. If you want to add more like rental pieces, chairs, linens, things like that to your order, you like this is kind of usually what people spend. We have like kind of four different, if you want to add on planning, okay, now we're jumping into another price tier. So no matter what, people are just not absolutely shocked by these prices. And usually the people who have checked that very minimum box have a really huge guest list and have a big laundry list of all the things they want. As soon as they get that, they might not even schedule a meeting because they're like, oh wow, this is I didn't, again, you don't know what you don't know. First time planning a wedding, people don't know what things cost. But for other people, that was just a really helpful piece of information that, here, and we also have that listed on our website. We have investments start at $7,000. Most people spend between like 10 and 15,000, and then it
mhm.
goes up from there. So there's very polite ways to say, I have a minimum spend, and if anybody
Right.
asks why, I can very, very succinctly list off the different reasons why we have to have that minimum.
Yeah, and I think it's just going through those conversations over and over gets you better and better at that. And I know
Yeah.
for us, when we started implementing the minimum initially, it was just so hard to have those conversations, especially at people watching this maybe at different stages of business. It's so hard to have those conversations. But truth be told, if you see that it needs to happen, you will get better at it. If it sounds like
Yeah.
you're gonna get the practice and familiarity with how do I frame this in a way that again it's a positive way that reflects the kind of brand that you're building.
Yeah, and I think if you come from that, especially that conversation from a place of like, we want you to have the best wedding you can have. And truth be
Hmm.
told, hiring us is going to eat up such a big chunk of your budget that it's going to have you cut in so many different places that I don't think that's going to feel worth it to you. So coming from it from a place of like, you want every person who inquires with you, whether they end up ultimately being your client or not, you want them to have like the wedding they want
That's right.
in the best way they can do that. And if that doesn't involve you, that's fine.
Yeah.
You gotta look for the people
I
that want you.
I wish I could cross stitch what you just said on a pillow. Like that's such an incredible quote because so many times it's easy for us to be like, well, they're just not willing to invest money. Well, maybe they don't have the money. My wife and I, we had a
Yeah,
minimum budget of $4,000. Our entire wedding, we didn't have rich parents. We were paying for our entire wedding. Our entire wedding was under $3,000. So we were
Oh no,
already like when we had it.
yeah, I always joke that like I couldn't afford me. We say that all the
Right,
time. Like I couldn't afford to hire me, and my entire wedding 15 years ago was basically completely DIY, and that
right.
was fine for me. I wouldn't have hired me either. But there are people who want everything taken off their plate, want this gorgeous design,
Right.
and that's who we are here to serve ultimately.
Right. Well, and to your point, it's a powerful thing to be able to care about that person enough that you're able to give them a just honest recommendation, but you're saying it from a point of like, I want you to have a great wedding. I want you to have this incredible event. And that tone and that perspective change, I think it changes everything.
It
To
does.
that point, as you're working through this, you're trying to ask that question. The overall purpose of a minimum budget is to be able to say, what is it going to cost for me to have to, again, take time away from my family, open up this proposal software and start building out this stuff. What have you done to really, let's say that you got someone through, you found them, they're fit, they love what you've proposed, they sign that agreement. I thought it was really interesting how you use kind of draft line items to automate some of this process. You're still taking all the notes, you still got all the templates, but you start out with everything in draft mode effectively,
Mhm.
but you've got all the notes, and then you put that line item for the retainer on there initially. What
Yep.
does it look like? So it sounds like even before you've met the people, you've already started that process of automating and optimizing that proposal flow to make sure it goes very quickly. What does that look for you? How do you reduce when you're doing so much creative work and very creative, thoughtful work on this? What does that look like, that flow look like to reduce the amount of time you're having to spend on those?
Yeah, so a lot of this is with kind of built-in systems that Curate has already. So, we have like a master wedding and design template. So as soon as we get that inquiry, that's in the form section. And then I can take that form and turn it into an event. And it asks me which template do I want to use. So if it's for a wedding, I pick our wedding one. If it's corporate, we have a corporate one. Social, those basically just don't have bouquets on them. But for a corporate event, they could have all the other things possibly. So everything's templated out there, so it'll have a line for like bouquet, bridesmaid bouquets, boutonnieres, corsages, hair floral. I mean, all the things. And then actually within each of those line items too, I already have like different recipe sections broken out. So under like the bouquet section, I got a recipe for like the flowers, and then I have like a hard goods and rentals, and then I have these
Hmm.
art there. So that is in the template. And so as I'm taking the notes, and even if I'm talking to them actively on the call and they're like, this bouquet on my Pinterest board, I'll drag and drop that over right when I'm on the call to them, right onto that line item. So that when I go back to do the proposal, I'm like, that's the bouquet they liked. Like that was the
Right.
one, or, I'll drag two in and I'll just type myself a quick note, like first image, they like the shape and size, second image is the color palette. So it's there. I use it as like a note taking system basically. And then I can go back and make all the wording and add the mood board and color palette, make that all look nicer. But you like really leaning into and really utilizing all the possible features of that template makes everything really fast then once they've actually booked us, because the recipe sections are already there, not having to like freshly create that. I'm really just having to I always start, the wedding bouquet in a wedding is usually my first step, that has all the really premium blooms, and everything is sort of based
Hmm.
on that. That's the wedding bouquet is the one that I really don't sacrifice a whole lot on. That's the one that's got all the really expensive stuff, all the delicate stuff, and then I use like the copy and paste sort of function within the recipe. So I will like copy and paste that into like centerpieces. Then I'm like, okay, so they're obviously not going to spend $450 on a centerpiece, because once we take the bridal bouquet, put it in a vase, and then add candles and a vessel and all of that, they're not going to spend that much. So what can I pull out of that bridal bouquet? What can I maybe sub in? What can I like add maybe as a little bit of filler? If we have this really beautiful peonies and garden roses, maybe I can like sub a couple of carnations just for some bulk. That'll be sort of buried deep in there. And I start just kind of like modifying the recipes. But once I have the one bouquet recipe done, the rest of it's a lot of copy and pasting, because I've got my complete color palette established from that bouquet. And then I can sub out stuff from
Hmm.
there. And a lot of that I'm just using the functionality that's already in Curate.
Right, that makes sense. And so I love your use of the copy and paste tool where you just, paste it, then figure out, hey, what is the new dynamics of whatever this piece is that I have,
Mhm.
and as a way. So you use the multiple recipes feature, and you basically
Very
have the different
much.
section. Okay.
Yes, because very much so. So especially when you get into like those bud vase centerpieces, I'll have like bud vase 1, bud vase
Hmm.
2, bud vase 3, bud vase 4. And then it's really helpful for my team to not put like all the different candle types together. So sometimes if it's like an all
Sure.
candle centerpiece, one of my different recipes will be like votive collection, taper collection, cylinder collection. Because I need my team to know like these vases are for the cylinders, these chimneys go with the tapers, these little tea lights go with these votives. So the multi-recipe tool is like hands down like for me the number one feature in Curate.
That's cool. That's really cool. I love hearing that. And there's not a lot of people who have built it. So I don't know why. Like because we got this very early on. We used to only have one recipe built into there, and it was we'd have people say, "Hey, I got this king table. I'm going to shove everything into one recipe," and it just doesn't. It's that's
It
not how
doesn't
we think.
work
Right,
because
right.
how do you know what goes in like the main tray? How do you know what goes in the bud vases? How do you know what goes in like the pin frog bowls? How do you know what goes in all these things if it's all just like blobbed
Yep,
under one recipe?
yep. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's an important thing for us, and there's some unique dynamics there. But that question of like, hey, how do we act? What else? Anything else you do to automate your proposal process as you're building this up? Because again, if I'm mapping this right, there's this whole not argument, whole philosophy interchanged. Some people are huge about putting in their recipes before they hand over the proposal. Some people are huge on being like, hey, we're going to build our recipes in 2 weeks out when it's time to order the flowers and we build up the budget. And what's so unique about this conversation is the answer is no to both of those, right? Like it's like actually no. As soon as this person books with me, then I add the flowers and the recipes
Yeah.
in. So it takes on this conversation I've had with so many people for so many years. It just takes kind of that third door option of like. But if I understand what you're saying, you do build in from the point that they book you, then you hit the ground running
Yep.
on
I
building in
fully
all of the
recipe.
components.
Yep,
Okay,
fully recipe to the penny. And, usually within a month of that like
sure.
official booking, they will get a to the penny design proposal that has all I know the seasonality of flowers. I know
Hmm.
what's going to be available, what's generally going to be available at least. And so I can give them that price point. Sometimes I like to say like it might take me up to 2 months. It depends on how much outside rental items they have on there, how many linens, chairs, if they want a big dance floor. I like to build in some time for rental companies to get back to me because they're not always as
Sure.
the speediest responders. But, I that's where not doing proposals ahead of time has really worked well for me because I don't mind spending time to recipe everything to the penny because somebody I know I am actively executing that event. And I think even just my personality type before we decided to do proposals after booking, it was really hard for me to really put in a ton of effort for somebody that I didn't even know if I was going to execute the wedding. Like if
Right.
something was really took a lot of brain power to like figure out the mechanics of it and figure out how we were even going to make this happen. It was really hard for me to like put in all that time and effort to be like, I don't even know if they're going to hire us. And I'm going to spend
Right.
5 hours like basically being an engineer to figure out how to do this.
Yeah.
But if I know I have to do it because they've actively booked us, then I'm so happy to sit and figure all the things out because I ultimately want it to be easy for myself. And so I did have a point I was going to make here, but I think just like
I
from
think
a
it's
mental
great.
perspective, it's much easier to like put in effort if you know that you are going to be the one to have to do it. And oh, I know what the point I was going to make. It was that we live in Michigan. We have like a true on season and off season. So our events run usually from April to early November. We'll get a couple of Christmas, New
Sure.
Year's stuff. For the most part, it's April to November. So we have a true off season. And I would much rather be doing recipes and doing proposals in the middle of February than I would 2 weeks before a wedding in July when I'm
Right.
already out of my mind busy. If I were doing that, it would cost me more money because I'd be having to pay a lot more freelancers to cover the part of the job that
Hmm.
I can do because I'm not sitting at a computer doing recipes in the middle of summer. I'm doing them in the winter and we're getting everything basically finalized then. And by having that all done, I do a quick glance over before I run the game plan and send it over to my wholesaler. I'm like, is there anything new that's popped up that I want to like put in here instead? I'm not just like blindly trusting my recipe from 6 months prior. I throw some eyes on it and say, yeah, this still looks good. But my brain was in the good spot when I did all this recipeing. But what's nice about it is then when my wholesaler comes back and say, hey, this came in the wrong color, this doesn't look good, I'm just like, yeah, send this sub instead. This is great. So
Right.
it's I'm not like stressing anything. If you do something 2 weeks out, you just have it's so much easier to just like overspend because you're like, oh, like you can get kind of distracted by the bright new shiny thing, like, oh, I really want to use that. Oh, and I think that it's just it's too hard to keep your margins where you need them to be to make a profitable business if you're running everything at the last minute.
Right. Right. Don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. It's fine.
Exactly.
Make sure
Same concept.
you have the list already and you stick to the list. I love it. Well, this
Right.
has been great, Emily. I think there's so much in here for both new and established designers alike and floral leads. There's so much power in. I think some of my big takeaways are kind of the way we think about clients and how we frame, even if it means we have our minimum budget is maybe higher than where they're at. But it's having to ask those tough questions around, is my business model running me or am I running my business model?
Sure.
And I think it's been very great. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your
Of
insights.
course. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, talk to you later.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, Ryan. Bye.